Thanks, Grant. It is a privilege to be here today sharing the stage with such two distinguished and accomplished women in the industry. And I think we'll get started because we're running a little bit late this morning. So before we jump into some of the more substantive questions, I thought it might be beneficial for all of us to hear a little bit about how you got to where you are. What were some of the influences that impacted your choices, your career decisions that moved you through the corporate ladder? So Lisa, as previously mentioned, you've had an extensive career in corporate America, rising through the ranks of a number of technology companies after working at the FCC for Chairman Patrick. Mm-hmm. And then you entered the technology sector, and you were able to shift your career from the legal arena over to the corporate arena. Can you talk a little bit about how you were able to make that transition and the skills you developed along the way to rise to the position that you have today?
Sure. I wish I could tell you that I had a real career path and was deliberate in my decision making, but I've decided to be honest this morning. The whole thing is completely accidental. So I started off as a lawyer. As Kathleen said, I made my choice to go to law school because I graduated from college in 1980 in an economic climate very similar to that today. So I was able to get only one job, selling sheets and towels for Canon Industries in the Southeast, which honestly I would have done, but the company car was a maroon Ford, and I really can't stand maroon cars, so I applied to law school, which is a really logical decision, but I figured that I could hide out from the economy and from a maroon future. And then I was recruited to a firm in Washington called Hogan & Hartson. I went to not a phenomenal top-tier law school, but they decided, the senior partners, to take a bet on me. I was the only person who was not an Ivy League lawyer. So they had a betting pool on whether I would make it or not. Thank goodness the folks betting on me won. And I went on to work at Hogan & Hartson for a couple of years, where I met the people at Viacom, who recruited me to be their general counsel when I was about 25. That wasn't any skill. They were just really cheap people back then, and they needed a kid. Did that for a couple of years and met Dennis Patrick. I was a Republican and very much a believer in Reaganomics, and so I had a great time working in the government and met in the chairman's office a huge number of people in industry, including the fellow who was running Time Warner. And that was really the pivot for me from the legal and policy arena into corporate. His name was Steve Ross, absolutely phenomenal, very unusual executive, and he said, when you're done with this government thing, come to New York and work for Time Warner. So I said, great. I went up to interview with him, and I said, what am I going to be doing for you? And he said, well, you know, when I met you, I thought you were smart. Why are you asking me? We've got a great brand. Come here and figure it out. And it turned out that he had a policy of just hiring people that he ran into that he thought could make a difference. There was a floor of us. One of the guys was Bob Pittman, who went on to buy Six Flags and then to run AOL and is now running Clear Channel. There was another guy who founded a video gaming company that went on to run EA. So we had a great time creating new businesses for Time Warner. And that was really, I had no idea what I was doing. He had no idea what I was doing. But I was able to get funding for a number of businesses in Europe and Asia. And that was the beginning of learning what a P&L is.
Wow. So it's basically being flexible about what you do with your career and taking advantage of opportunities when they come along.
Absolutely. I would say it's definitely standing in the way of luck, having your ears open for new opportunities, and then being willing to be scared out of your mind. So every job I've taken, I really had no idea what I was doing when I started. Mm-hmm. And that adrenaline rush actually over time becomes quite addictive.
So Maggie, you have had a similar fascinating career, lots of different positions throughout your career, and you come from good DNA. I think it's all of your sisters have impressive careers, and you and your sister Denise Morrison, who's the CEO of Campbell's Soup, are the only two sister CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, and I know you've talked about that. You've also said that throughout your career, it's been great to have your sister there for advice and counsel, going both ways. And so I thought you might want to chat a little bit about the benefit of having a trusted confidant as you're going up through the ranks, you're making some tough decisions, and to be able to have that in a sister has got to be a great opportunity.
Yeah, it definitely is. I'm very blessed. My sister Denise and I are 13 months apart, so she was my first business partner when I was 7, and we would run carnivals in our neighborhood and give all the money to charity. So we started in the service for others environment at a very young age as well. You know, I grew up in a family that my father had 4 daughters, so we were the only material he had to work with. My dad used to take us to work in the late 70s, and before it was cool to take your daughter to work. And we would go into New York City. We grew up in New Jersey, on the Jersey Shore, before MTV ruined it. But we had a very incredible childhood, because my dad would come home at night. We would sit with him at the dinner table. He would talk about his day. He actually was an executive with AT&T and worked for New Jersey Bell, New York Tel, Ohio Bell, and back and forth to AT&T during the Bell monopoly days. So we were very comfortable growing up being involved with things that happened in the business. And at one point when we were teenagers, my dad was the head of marketing for AT&T. So we had the first touch-tone phone in our home. We had the Princess phone. So we would get to try out all the new products for telecom in our house. And just a little diversion, we had a mynah bird, you know, that imitates, and it sat right next to the telephone. So it learned how to imitate the ring. So the phone would like be ringing all day long, but it was never the phone. It was always the bird, but we would all run to answer it. But Denise and I have helped each other in our careers. We took very different paths. I went up through the technology path of high growth companies. After I got married, I moved to California from the East Coast and had my first job at a software company in the late 70s, before software was cool, for a nascent industry called the cable television industry when it was first starting. And I had the opportunity in a 12-year career there to go from the head of the accounts receivable department to running the US, Canadian, and European operations for that company. And we built market share in the United States to own 80% of the market. So it was a great career opportunity for me, where Denise started at Procter & Gamble and went through very large Fortune 500 corporate America in the consumer products and the food industry to get where she is today. So it's been a great journey for both of us, and we try to spend time together every month, just the two of us. And we don't just talk about business, we also talk about our families and sort of our own aspirations. So it's really nice to have her as part of my life.
I know, that's very, very lucky to have all that. And
If I could just say, we were talking about acronyms backstage. I'm now realizing with your childhood, your alphabet soup must have been SS7, ISDN.
Yeah, some things never change, you know.
That's true, that's true. So, as leaders in a technology sector that's rapidly changing, when you're looking to make sure that your companies are positioned for the next steps, the next challenges, and trying to anticipate what's coming down the pike, what are the skills that both of you look for when filling senior positions, whether we're talking about a CFO or a general counsel or any kind of senior position? Because having talked with both of you, it's a little bit different than I think people might imagine. So it'd be great if you can each touch on, as a result of the careers you've had and the lessons you've learned, what are you looking for in one of your senior leaders?
For me, I look for honesty, courage. So you have to be courageous, I think, to be honest. That creates trust in the senior team, and then the ability to help other people through change. Because no matter what company you're in, no matter what industry you're in, we're in a time of just incredible technological and economic disruption. So we have to be able to manage other people through change. And whether it's good change or bad change, I think any change is terrifying for people. So being able to cause people to trust you, to trust the senior team, to have a senior team that trusts each other to get through times of change is critically important. Really, everything else can be taught, including all of the acronyms.
So I would sort of answer that question, Kathleen, in 4 categories. I think from a senior leadership perspective, it starts with being able to set an agenda. And that means having a strategic thought process, so someone who can think strategically, that can set priorities and direction, that fosters innovation within teams, and then last but not least, continuous improvement. Once you set that agenda, it is about engaging others and making sure that you can participate collaboratively with other people within the organization, that there's good teamwork, that you can motivate others, and that you're very proactive from a communication skill perspective. I think then it goes to execution. So you start with the agenda, it's the engagement, and then it gets to execution. And I try to hire people within our company that are performance oriented, that they're all about delivering results, because at the end of the day, that's what matters, that they take ownership, that they use good judgment, and that they're accountable for what they do. And then I call the last category the soft skill category, because I think, the first 3 are really all about the day-to-day of the business. But then you also want to have the nuances and the mores of great leadership, the EQ in addition to the IQ. And that's being tenacious and resilient. I think, as Lisa said, you want people that are courageous and are fearless, that aren't afraid to take the right risks at the right time, that are curious. I think curiosity is a huge attribute that I look for in all of the folks that we hire, because you have to stay curious to stay on top of what's going on. And someone who's comfortable with technology and change, because as we all know, that's what we live with every single day.
That's true. So you strive to fill all your seats with the right people, and then the folks who report to them, you want them to do the same thing. But one of the biggest challenges I've seen throughout my career is you get it wrong. You hire the wrong person. I'm going off script now, sorry lady. And so you've gotten it wrong, or someone on your team has gotten it wrong. What's the challenge associated with getting them to fix it? Because that's the hardest thing, I think, is recognizing that someone's either in the wrong seat or maybe shouldn't be with the company at all, and you need to move them out because it's not going to help the company, it's not going to help their career. How do you manage through that? How do you lead on that so that the folks that are working for you do it soon and do it the right way?
Well, I'll start on that. One of the things I think we have a tendency to do in business is to try to reform people, to try to make people be someone who they're not, right? So if we all know what our strengths are and what our weaknesses are, and if we don't, we need to sit down and have a conversation with ourselves in the mirror about that subject, because we're all good at certain things and we're all not good at other things. And if you wind up in a job that plays to your weakness and not your strength, you're definitely in the wrong job. So I spend time making sure I'm not trying to rehabilitate people, but I'm putting them in the right seats on the bus for our company and for their skill base. And I have honest conversations with people that work for me about where they should play, because you want people to get up every morning. They're giving their best hours of their day to your job, right? So you want people that are passionate, that are pumped, that are going to come in and feel good about what they're doing, not the other way around. And I also believe when people are not in the right position, they know it, and they don't know what to do about it. And as a leader, what you have to do is help them move to the right spot. And by being direct and being honest about that, I find that I can get people into those right seats, and if not, help them move out of the organization and get in the right seat someplace else. I think people do come to work every day to do a good job. So part of our responsibility as leaders is to help them find the right place for them to be, whether it's inside the organization or outside.
Lisa?
I think I would agree wholly, but I would also add that there's a huge amount of over-communication that leaders need to do with their organizations as to the employee-employer compact generally.
Yep.
So there are still many organizations that are sort of employment for life types of organizations, or where people believe that there's employment for life at the lower ranks, but at the upper ranks, employment has become more transactional. If that's the case, it's really not good leadership to continue to permit the organization generally to believe that there's employment for life. And frankly, I don't think that exists anywhere in the United States anymore. So communicating with employees about the pact, the social pact that you're making with them, what your expectations are, what their expectations should be, how you can work together to develop a career and an environment that's satisfactory to the employee. And to Maggie's point, if there's not a fit any longer, that's okay, it's not personal. We can help find a career in another location. But that, there is still in many, many companies, this underlying long tenured belief that if I show up for work every day, even if I'm only holding down the seat that I'm in, that I have a right to be there. So we spent a lot of time talking about the notion that we have to recruit our employees to come back every day. Our only assets are our data and our employees. We're not capital intensive. So my job is recruiting people to come back in that door every day, but every employee's job is to come every day and add value to the company. And when that breaks down, the conversation has to change. Are you in the wrong place, but you want to be at the company and you have the will and the curiosity to learn new skills, in which case let's figure out what the appropriate career path is, or are you just not culturally or emotionally suited, in which case moving people out of the company quickly and frankly mercifully is the right thing to do. It requires as well over communication at the individual level. So our view is that semi-annual performance reviews, if you're engaging in conversations only semi-annually, you're a complete failure as a leader and a manager. So we do basically day-to-day feedback so that people can adjust their behavior, people can have those honest conversations. And if you're doing them every day, they're not as emotionally weighted as if you're building up a head of steam and having them at the half year or at the annual mark. I think a lot of people really do not have introspective personalities. A lot of people don't have a high level of self-awareness. So the real, I think, art form in leadership and management around employee career pathing is to get the person on the same plane that you're on. Sort of, do I view Kathleen in the same way that Kathleen views Kathleen and Kathleen views her relationship with me? That's really the conversation that you have to get to. And again, it starts with a team at the top that trusts each other to have those honest conversations, to role model the right behavior to people lower in the organization.
So essentially, you do have to continue to earn the right to be in the seat at the table, doing the work for the company, and then adjust as needed to meet the needs of the company, because the economy isn't getting any stronger at the moment, and it's a pretty challenging market out there, so you want your best and your brightest at leading the company.
But I also think it is about clarifying what success looks like for each individual, right? So there's the pact is really, here's the deliverables, here's what you have to do, this is what success is. But you also want to create an environment where it's okay for people to make mistakes and course correct, because it's not just about being in a box. It's about helping the company grow, to think about your job every day in a different way, because what was value added yesterday isn't necessarily value added tomorrow. And it's, there's a lot of nuance to that as well. But it is one of the things that is tough to do every single day with employees who have different challenges in their lives and are focused on different things, or have tough positions and transition positions that they have to undertake on behalf of a company as well. But that's what gets us out of bed in the morning,
Right.
and keeps us going.
Right. So as you're dealing with a lot of the disruptions that we've seen over the last 5 years, and still you're both leading companies that are really transforming where they want to be, what they want to do, what value they're adding, both of you faced particularly challenging problems throughout your career, whether with this company or a prior company. And I thought it might be helpful if you can talk a little bit about how you might have had to think outside your comfort zone and the skills and experiences that you drew upon when you were faced with a particularly challenging issue.
Gee, thanks. So I would say, again, in my career, I've had a number of environments where I've had to go in as the change agent to completely reimagine a business model. So I think kind of one of the most public examples was AOL Broadband. When I took it over, we had about 250 million in revenues, and we were losing 300 million a year. So it was not going to scale, or it was, but you can never make up those losses in volume. And we were selling a package that included both bandwidth and the portal. We had very little coverage. We couldn't get additional coverage nationwide. So we had to assemble a team of people and really rethink how we were going to relaunch the service to be successful for the future. And the way we did it was by combining people who had been in the broadband business. This is a decade ago, so 2001, 2002. It was still young, but there was a lot of belief around broadband, that it was just high speed. There was nothing else other than speed. And already people had built kind of legacy mindsets. Well, we tried that 5 years ago, and it didn't work. And I think in technology, when somebody says that, it's really the kiss of death. I had somebody the other day say to me, well, we tried that 15 years ago at Nortel, and it didn't work. It's like, really? Completely irrelevant. Every single day, you have to ask the same questions you asked the day before. Technology is moving so quickly that what was impossible yesterday is possible today. So I think it was getting together a group of people who, frankly, didn't know any better because they'd never been in broadband. They were bringing programming experiences from broadcast television, from filmed entertainment, from completely different environments, and people who had been in the bandwidth business, and locking them in a room until folks got over all of their pre-existing sort of barriers. And we broke through to a new broadband experience, to a new business model that enabled us in a 2-year period to drive to $1 billion in revenue and $400 million in cash flow. We were very lucky to have a big brand at the time, but it was a combination of deep, deep, deep industry knowledge, getting over pre-existing mindsets, and people with creative minds looking at the problem in a whole new way. And I'd say in every case I've tried to replicate that, and it's worked, knock on wood, pretty well so far.
Great. Maggie?
You know, if I look back on my career, there's a lot of different things that I've done that have been outside my comfort zone. I would say one of the best experiences that was a very high learning time for me, I call it the tale of two cities, is when I ran a company called Wink Communications. And it was a startup where I left as the executive vice president of AT&T Wireless with 12,000 employees to go to a startup taking a technology out of a lab down in the Silicon Valley area and creating a business around it, everywhere from hiring people to raising money to putting a business plan in place, a board of directors. And I had never done anything like that before. And I found once I took over this company that if I didn't go out and raise a fairly substantial amount of money, we were going to fold up. And I'd never done that before. I didn't have a CFO. I went out and through leveraging my network, I raised $200 million, and I brought in strategic partners to be on the board who would also put capital into the company. And then it was getting customers. And when you have an AT&T business card, the door opens and people take your call. When you come from a startup, nobody takes your call and no doors open. So I'd have to go through the windows or the air vents to get meetings in order to get momentum built for this company. And I can remember days that I didn't even know if I could make payroll or not. And you know, you're put in a situation where you just have to get up every day, that resilience to do your personal best, to drive to get the right people, to keep hope in the organization. And you know, I wound up taking the company public. It had a $2.5 billion market cap. I think I was the 4th woman to take a company public in the United States, which I had never done before either. And then the commitment to shareholders, to customers, to employees. And I wound up selling the business after 6 years to Liberty Media, to John Malone, and did a full circle on that. And as I look back on that, it was a huge time for growth. But you know, leveraging things that I had learned, my strengths, taking new steps, again, every day, course correcting, steps forward, step back. But it really taught me that you can get up every day and continue to refresh and make a difference and push forward. And with great people around you, you can make the impossible possible. And I think that's something I bring to the table even today at Frontier. It's a Fortune 500 company, it's big, we've quadrupled the size of the company since I became CEO. And all of those challenges, they remake themselves in different ways. And I love that challenge. It's something that I think renews me as a leader, so you stay fresh in terms of that decision-making process.
I think if I could, the thing, and I'd like to give a more recent example, the thing that's particularly interesting is taking a company that is very successful and challenging it to reinvent itself. Mm-hmm. So, and I'm sure Frontier has the same
Absolutely.
issue. Neustar is now 18 years old. It's been very successful running very large databases that do all the routing and addressing for the telephone networks in North America, as well as providing routing and addressing for the internet infrastructure, so that today we complete about 20% of all queries globally. So we're very happy. We love these gigantic data services. They are our lifeblood, but we're challenged now to find additional growth for the future. And it's so fascinating when you're not sitting on a burning platform, when people love what they do and they're completely entranced with what they do and the revenues continue to grow. How do you create that burning platform? How do you create the growth for the future? How do you get people to reimagine their business? It is a particular challenge. Not that I would want the burning platform, but getting folks to move very quickly has been interesting. So a couple of years ago, we sat down and said, where is our future? How do we find additional services? How do we continue to grow? And again, we had absolutely brilliant people running services that never go down, have never been breached, et cetera, but really very inward facing. So the first thing we did, and we were fortunate, again, climbing through the air vents, as Maggie would say, the film and entertainment industry was looking for an industry-wide routing, addressing, and authentication registry. And so we went and competed for it. It was fantastic. They kept saying, now, how do you spell the name of the company again, and who are you? But we were fortunate enough to win the right to build that registry, and we were able to take many of our skills from providing number management, from providing order management services, from caller ID, and from our internet infrastructure business to bear in that service, which is launched recently. It's branded Ultraviolet, and I think they've got now over 100 million films in the registry, and that was an eye-opener for all of us. I think we all thought that we were going to be living in acronym heaven for the rest of our lives. I mean, any company that calls caller ID CNAM, you've got to wonder. But we discovered that we could quite easily port our skill sets into providing registry services for a number of companies, and then in taking the transaction detail from those registries and providing marketing insights to our customers. So we're still very much embedded in the registries business, but we've been able to take our skill sets and our existing assets and repurpose them, if you will, into entire new revenue streams, which is extremely exciting. That first step, however, moving from, or in addition to providing caller ID, providing authentication for the Green Hornet and Mission Impossible 5, that was a huge leap for us.
Right. Well, that takes me, as you're talking about, taking skill sets, exporting them, moving into a different area. Maggie, you were in the wireless arena and the tech field, and you took a company public and Microsoft, and then you get a knock on the door that says, gee, do you want to come and run a small rural telephone company? And I think that
it was a weak moment, I will tell you, yes.
So I think a lot of people would say, really, all this tech background, and you want to go back to the phone company business, which I know that's where your father was working, but what was your vision? What were you thinking?
Yeah, what were you thinking?
What were you thinking?
It is, just to digress, it is quite funny, because when the AT&T broke up in 1984, my father interviewed for 2 jobs, the president of Cincinnati Bell and the president of the predecessor to Frontier, which was Citizens Communications. He didn't get the Citizens job, so it's really quite funny that I took that job down the road. But, and he did go to Cincinnati Bell as president, so he had a great career in the telephone industry as well. You know, I had the opportunity in my career. I've sat on 23 public company boards. As a matter of fact, Lisa and I sat on the Time Warner Telecom board together. And when I was on that board, Lisa was running around like a nut. And I think for the first 4 meetings, Lisa didn't come in person. She was on the phone. I felt like it was like Charlie's Angels. I said, there's really probably nobody named Lisa Hook, you know. But I had the opportunity to sit on the board of a subsidiary company to Citizens at the time, now Frontier, that was public. It was a CLEC. And I got to know 4 or 5 of the board members from Frontier at that time. And when the company had a falling out with their existing CEO, they tried to sell the company. They went through a strategic review, but couldn't really get anybody to buy it. So this was a company that was in trouble, but I knew the company had good assets. It had good bones, it had great markets, really strong people that were taking care of customers every day. And I think one of the things as leaders is to look at what's unconventional. You know, everybody thinks you should go do something, you know, that's more along the lines of what you've done in the past. I think repotting is a way to learn and a way to generate value. And I think as leaders, you have to try to see around the corner. And this was in 2004, so it was when broadband had first started, as Lisa mentioned, back in the early 2000s. It was still, you know, a little bit more like just dial-up to get broadband access. But I thought the networks that we had at Frontier could easily transform to a broadband business, an IP business. And when I came to the company, again, changing the mindset from a sleepy rural telephone company to a broadband communication services company was really the journey we were going to take. And I built a leadership team that didn't come from the telephone business. They came from all different walks of life that could come in and help us refresh and fresh start and get, you know, new points of view of how do we make that transition, and to bring our employees along, because we're an 80-year-old company and we have a lot of history and a lot of legacy, and what you want to do is to take the best of that and add to that to get everyone into a competitive mode, a mode of transformation, a mode of understanding that change is not scary, that it's healthy and that it's good, and that you can win in the marketplace. And it's been a terrific journey. I'm going on 9 years with the company now, and most people thought, well, what were you thinking, you know, 9 years ago? But we have transformed the company, and we are on that journey, and we have had the opportunity to create new businesses and new revenue streams for the company, and we'll continue to do that.
Thanks. And Lisa, as you were talking a little bit about Neustar and how you've refocused, repurposed the company, a similar question for you, because you had come from private equity, you had done AOL, Time Warner, SunRocket, and then you decided to go to Neustar, which does numbering. What were the attractions? What were the challenges that you perceived, and why it made sense from a career perspective?
So again, I'm not particularly motivated by career perspectives. I really, in full honesty, went to Neustar for really 3 reasons. I had retired and thought that I was going to be a full-time mom. It was the thing that my children had always wanted, and I was the best full-time mom you can imagine, and I'm sticking with that story. I ran the auctions.
You said you were going to be honest today. What's that all about?
I ran the auctions, I picked up the kids.
Oh my gosh, I can't
So
even
it all
imagine.
came to a head one day when the youngest one came home from school, and I had been reading Martha Stewart Living, and he found me in the linen closets labeling the shelves, queen fitted sheets, queen flat sheets. And at dinner that night, everybody...
That's numbering. It's numbering, yeah.
It was numbering.
That's right.
Everybody showed up, the 3 boys and my husband and the 2 dogs, very seriously, and they went around the table and explained one by one how I was ruining the fabric of the family because I was insisting that people show up for dinner on time. I was too involved with their schools. And as the youngest one said, it's time you find an interest outside the home. So reason number 1 is I was kicked out of my own house.
Too funny.
Reason number 2 is that it was a huge challenge. As you noted, I'd spent my career in B2C content businesses, and network addressing couldn't be further from content. So it was big and scary. I had absolutely no idea what any of them were talking about, to the point where in week 3, I finally said to some guy in the hall, "What is a TN?" It's like, telephone number. I said, well, we could just call them phone numbers, people. So extraordinarily scary. And then the third reason really is nobody had ever heard of this company. It is providing mission-critical services. It's been doing so flawlessly, and you all will appreciate this. On our primary service, we have 2,300 SLAs, service level agreements. We haven't had a foot fault in 4 years. The team of people at Neustar, absolutely brilliant, completely inward-facing, and they have no idea how smart they are. I mean, it was just, as you said, it had extraordinary bones. It was just an incredibly, incredibly exciting company with 1,200 people sitting out in rural Virginia talking to themselves. So for me, it was so easy once I learned what a TN meant and CNAM and sort of all the lingo to just say the capabilities at this company to provide other registry services industry-wide, unparalleled. I'm so, so excited that now, even when my children beg me to come home and cook dinner, I'm like, yeah, no.
This is more fun.
But I was, in fact, the best mother.
And we won't question
Retired.
that. Retired.
Best
There
retired
you go.
mother.
So as we're getting towards the end of the panel, I thought I might talk for a minute about leadership skills, harnessing effective leaders, and what you look for in leaders. And there have been some interesting studies lately about the differing leadership skills of men versus women, and whether or not they empower and mentor men more than women, or approaches to problem solving. And they've tried to use some of these studies to talk about what we should be looking for in leaders in companies, and whether or not you need just one style or the other, and how you effectively harness these maybe basic genetic DNA differences to put together an effective team. And so I wanted to see if both of you could comment a little bit about, as you are building your team, and Maggie, I think you mentioned, you look for different skills, you look for an overall team. What you found as you build teams, and the style differences and the leadership differences of the folks that you bring on board.
Well, I think first and foremost, I am a woman executive, right? So I know who I am, and I know that there are certain attributes that I have as a woman that are very positive in the business environment and can bring out the best in organizations and results. And when I think about that, I think about being, intuitive. I'm a connector, I'm a networker, very proactive on communications. I'm a nurturer, I'm a service to others person. Those are all, sometimes looked at as female characteristics. But for me, I think there are ways to create power differently than more the command and control approach to leadership. And I think that if you combine diverse leadership styles of men and women together, you get better outcomes in terms of how you lead and how you go to market and how you interact to take care of customers. So I do think that having that balance is important. And I do think that different styles lend themselves to different approaches. I don't believe there's only one way to get anywhere. I think there are multiple paths that you can take in order to get to the same place. And you should encourage, as leaders, to have people bring their personal best to that path that's the right path for them to get to the answer. And I think women do have different paths that they take, and it might not be the same path that a man would take, but if it gets to the same answer in a positive outcome way from a results perspective, that's all good.
I think I come at it maybe differently in that IBM in the 1960s did a huge number of studies about effective decision-making and the effect on shareholder value. And sort of not surprisingly, the most effective teams with respect to decision-making are heterogeneous teams. So I look at it more broadly, not just men versus women, but how—
It's men and women.
Yes. How does one build a heterogeneous team? And that's not just gender.
Right.
It's cultural background.
Right.
It's socioeconomic background. It's minority representation.
It's experience.
It's experience, right?
Yeah.
So we take a whole host of attributes into account when building the team. Both outgoing networkers, and extreme introverts.
Yep.
This is killing me being up here, and Maggie's totally comfortable. So you don't want everybody on your team to be talking at once, right? So we look for, again, everything including extroverts and introverts, people who lean in and make decisions immediately, so they hear something, they make a decision on the spot. I'd say of our 10, there are 3 on my team like that. There are another 2 who have absolutely no reaction. I have to check their pulse. But they'll come back the next day in the next meeting and have an extraordinarily well thought out response to the set of issues. So I think it's building a really effective leadership team is a dramatically broader issue than just gender.
I completely agree. I've seen it, and I've seen the value added of the diverse groups. And it is an extraordinary testament to both of your leadership skills, what you've done with the 2 companies, as well as throughout your career. So I know how incredibly busy both of you are, because I work for Maggie and I know what you do. So I want to thank you for taking the time to come here. I know it was personal time you could have used on driving company values, but I appreciate you sharing everything with the folks here at TIA. So
Before we end, Kathleen is a terrific facilitator. She's also been a terrific employee at Frontier, but Kathleen started her career with Frontier on our board of directors. She was on our board for 3 years and did an incredible job in the boardroom. And when we tripled the size of the company, I convinced her to come in-house to help me, and has done a magnificent job on our senior leadership team as well. So you are very accomplished in your own right as well, Kathleen. So just a shout out for our moderator.
It's a little love fest here.
Yes.
Thank you, and thank you, ladies, and good luck with the rest of the conference.
Thank you.